We're back. What's up, everyone? How y'all doing? Hopefully we're live. We're live? Let's see. I think we're live. Oh, shoot. I went full screen accidentally. Going over the linebacker room today. Training camp is just around the corner. Thank God. Need something, at least. Something football related. But yeah, love going over the position breakdowns. Linebacker. Okay, I just went to that. But the linebacker room. Definitely a room that I feel like has improved. Hasn't been great in quite some time, but I do feel better about this group overall. Just from like a starter's perspective and even a depth perspective, I feel like we added slightly better depth and we got at least a little bit slightly better at the starter position. So those are good things. I think it's also very important with this new scheme. Because like if you go watch Baltimore's defense, the linebacker play was extremely important. I also think it's kind of a position that gets underrated because there's obviously, the premium positions. I think like elite linebackers is how a lot of like top defenses really set themselves apart. That's why like last year, you look at like the Niners, the Ravens, they were like top defenses because they had insane linebackers that could cover a lot of ground in that second level, and they could help, a lot of the first level defenders, the third level defenders, just making life easier. So I think it's an underrated position. I think adding players there is kind of how you separate yourself as a defense. Looking at the linebacker room, like this is the off-ball linebacker room, obviously. We did the edges already. Off-ball, David Long, Jordan Brooks, Anthony Walker, Duke Riley, Channing Tindall, and Cam Brown. That's really it. You only have like 6 off-balls on the roster right now. And we probably keep, depending on like the edges, I would say we're probably going to keep like 4. If I had to guess, just based on, numbers wise. I mean, there is a world where you keep 5, depending on how it all plays out. But looking at it, I think you have a clear 3, and I think the other guys are kind of fighting for a spot, possibly 2 spots. Obviously, Jordan Brooks, David Long, are your starters. I think Anthony Walker is your number 3, which is cool with me. I think Anthony Walker is the upgrade at depth because he's better than what you had last year at depth-wise. Is like better than Duke Riley, Channing Tindall. And then I think Jordan Brooks is your upgrade at your starters, better than Jerome Baker, and just a better fit for the system. We'll start with Jordan Brooks because I'm a huge fan of Jordan Brooks. I've talked about this for quite some time, but Jordan Brooks' fit is just so good. Like he's going to play the Roquan Smith role. You need a guy that can, one, just be a good leader in the middle of the defense. He's a great communicator, pre-snap, post-snap, but then also being able to like find, carry receivers down the field, mirror and match them, carry tight ends. He can just go and gain so much depth. He can spot drop, come downhill and close the gap quickly. Just so many things that he does really well. He also has some pretty good range versus the run too. Sideline to sideline range, makes plays versus the screen. You can leave him isolated in the middle of the field, and it looks like this where you're gonna have 3 down linemen, 2 standing edges right here, and you just have 1 middle linebacker in the middle of the field. The other guy filling in the box, a part of the run fits, is a safety. You gotta have a guy that can cover a lot of ground, quickly process what's happening. And Jordan Brooks last year still played pretty good, in my opinion. From the film I watched, he played pretty well. And that was like a year coming off of an ACL. So should be even healthier coming into next season. I'm a huge fan of him as a player. Coverage-wise, range-wise, I think he's a smarter overall player than Baker. I think Baker was a little more like of, the stack and track patient type with the athleticism. While Brooks is like more get downhill, play super aggressive. And then I also think he's more instinctive in coverage, which is nice. And also just seeing him like have a good feel for this, like see number 3, read that route concept, reading like through number 3, sees that he's working vertically. You have that help over the top, pass that off. He works the outside of you. Find number 2 working back underneath. You take that away. That receiver, just really phenomenal stuff. I'm such a big fan of Jordan Brooks. He's also a good blitzer. They're going to ask him to just move all over the field, do a lot of different stuff. This is like, as I've said, not even just based on the linebacker room, he's like the guy that they brought in defensively, whether it's free agency or through the draft, that I think is going to be like the biggest difference maker this season. Just looking at it, I've said that Jordan Brooks and Jalen Ramsey are going to be the 2 most important parts because of how important those positions were in the Raven system from what Weaver's going to bring over. And I think at edge, like you'll be fine with getting like pressure, disruption, from multiple different people up front. Like they're going to be a whole unit up there that does that. That's why I think, Brooks and Ramsey are so important. See if people end up getting in here. Okay, whoa, gotta do that. Go here. Let me just open up the content real quick. Boom, my channel. But yeah, definitely fan. Hopefully that isn't being heard. Wait, why can't I close this out? Hold on, I'm on my channel real quick. Trying to tweet this out. Let me know what you guys think down in the chat of the linebacker room, how you guys feel about it. I should probably make this be able to go live on Twitter. Ooh, that's absolutely bright. Just flashbang myself. But yeah, Jordan Brooks, still young. It's I love these types of pickups where the guy's still young. He's a former first-round pick. Even when he came out of the draft, I thought it was a little bit of a reach of him in the first round, but he played better than I expected coming out of Texas Tech. I think his instincts improved a lot. I thought he was better for Seattle than expected. And getting a young guy like that, that's an ascending player on a pretty solid deal for a free agent like that, I like it. You get him for, basically through his prime too, to be that leader in the middle of your defense, which is nice. Oh shoot, I just canceled something out. Let's see. Let me pull this up real quick. But yeah, after Jordan Brooks, that's obviously the main guy they added. I'm obviously a big fan of him, and similar to last year when the Dolphins added David Long in free agency, he was another guy that I was a huge fan of. That wasn't even a cheaper deal. The David Long deal is absolutely amazing. Brooks definitely brings you more in coverage, but David Long is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, I think, versus the run. We need to extend Long 2 to 3 years, maybe 2 years guaranteed. Yeah, I'm totally down for extending Long, especially because I don't think the deal would be super expensive, which is great. I think, you could probably get him on a fairly cheap deal still and have him around for a couple more years. Plus, let me see, what's David Long? How old is David Long at this point in his career? Because I don't think he's that old. Get him for a couple more years too would be nice. It doesn't say, of course, it pops up. He's 27. Okay. 27. So yeah, getting for another couple years would be nice. Because as long as, not too late into the 30s, we should be good. What's up, Ryder? How do you feel about the Dolphins saying they're not giving Tua $55 million? Have they said that, or is that just the rumors from ESPN and stuff? Because I don't know if it's too much about because I feel like when it comes to the contract stuff, I don't think it has to do too much with the actual number per year. That's kind of not really where a lot of this stuff comes mainly from the contracts. The big stuff, is obviously the guaranteed, and then how it's structured is very important. Where it's put out 3 years, if there are void years, things like that is a lot more important. I think it's the little things. I feel like the Dolphins would be willing to pay in that 50-ish million range. But I think it has to have the right stuff to help them out, and possibly have the injury stuff in there. Yeah, but I don't think the Dolphins said that. That's just reports from ESPN and stuff, right? Yeah. So I would take that stuff with a grain of salt, personally. But we'll see how it plays out. I still think a deal is going to get done. I don't know if it will be what the exact numbers will be, but I imagine it will probably be around the Lawrence deal. But David Long, absolute stud for the Dolphins. Going to be that number 2 linebacker. Probably a guy that I think, you don't want to have on the field a ton in obvious passing situations. I think having Jordan Brooks will help him, because Jordan Brooks, at least having a linebacker next to you that's very good in coverage, also a very good communicator, can cover a lot of ground, will make Long's life easier, I think, too. Because that was the problem last year in coverage at the second level, is communication. I think Long and Baker kind of struggled with that, or, whether it was the backups and stuff. But he's played really well versus the run, one of the better run defending linebackers in the league. I think that's very helpful. Bringing in Anthony Walker, I think, is a good thing too, because I think Walker's a pretty solid number 3 linebacker to have. You got him on a cheap deal. He's a pretty well-rounded player that does this, I think, a very similar job versus the run and the pass. So he can come in, and I don't think there'll be a drop off from Long versus the run, but I think he's even better in coverage. But he's still solid enough to be good versus the run. So I like bringing that sort of signing in. But David Long, one of the better signings the Dolphins made last year. super instinctive watching him, make these plays, whether he's shooting gaps. He's not like a super like scrape type linebacker, but yeah. He will definitely get downhill and make plays in a hurry, which is very, very helpful. Would you rather keep Holland or Phillips? Personally, Phillips. I think it's more. I think Phillips is more impactful player. I think he plays more of a premium position. I think the injury is why you're a little hesitant to extend Phillips right now. But I would, if it was me, I would extend Phillips first. I just feel like that position's more important. But yeah, I would personally lean Phillips over Holland. I think Holland's good, but I think he's asking for I know he's asking to be like the highest paid safety in the league, and like the safety number like really got high this year from what Whitfield is getting, and I feel better being able to find like solid safety plays than someone to replace Phillips. My opinion too is not worth $55 million. I think they should let him play his 5th year. Personally, I think you just extend him. I think letting him play on the 5th year is not the best idea. Like, if you're letting him play on the 5th year, you're just like, you're letting him go at that point. Like, he's gone, Either way, he's going to be your quarterback for the next 2 seasons, so might as well extend him now. So if it doesn't work out, you can still get out of it down the line. It would still be about 2 years away. And then if it does work out, then you have him on an absolute great contract, because then the contract will look much better in like 2 years. But yeah. Let's see. Anthony Walker. Let me pull this up. Here's some Anthony Walker in coverage right here. Pretty instinctive. Good job like reading the QB's like depth right there. He sees his drop happen. He's staying patient. And then once he sees his eyes come back across and that he's, hit the, back of his drop right there, he's able to break on this, get in the throwing lane, cut that off. Just overall, very instinctive play. It was interesting because the first things I read about him was he was a better run defender. But then when I watched his film from last season, I think I became more impressed with his ability within coverage. Veteran safety prices are low. Trade Holland if you can get a 1. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they'll get a 1. The safety, as you're talking about the market, I don't think it's super high for safeties, even the trade market. So yeah, that's what I'm like. I think it's more plausible to be able to find solid safety play for cheaper than being able to like replace a Jalen Phillips. Plus, like Jalen Phillips is he was ascending before that injury. Who do you think will be the best NFL rookie this season? Interesting. Who do I think will be the best? Hold on. Who do I think will be the best NFL rookie? That is tough to say. I'm trying to go like through the list. I think Laiatu Latu has a good chance of being like defensive rookie of the year because I think he's the most pro ready of that edge class. Offensively, I'm a big Troy Fatano guy, but that's more of an offensive lineman. I think he'll be dominant though for the Steelers, Pittsburgh. It's tough to say. I need to see probably the list. Jalen Wright, I could definitely see that. I just don't know if he'll get enough touches for that. Right for Dolphins, yeah. Oh, for Dolphins, yeah. Like definitely. I think for the Dolphins it could be a few different guys, but yeah, Wright's definitely on that list. But yeah, this like I'm looking at the draft now. I could see like I think Romo Dunze could have a really year. Obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. Try not to say like the obvious names. And maybe guys, a lot of like if you look at the draft, like a lot of O linemen went first. And I'm not sure how they look within their systems. Like I'm a big fan of like Tuilisi Fuaga. I think Kenyon Mitchell will have a really good season in Philadelphia. I had to guess. Graham Barton and for the Buccaneers. But yeah. Lad McConkey will probably be the Chargers' #1 receiver. They won't throw the ball a ton, but he'll still have a good season because he's going to be their #1 guy, in my opinion. Should be interesting, though. There's a lot of names across the board. Yeah. Anthony Walker, for the Dolphins, I think he's a better number 3. And when you have your like linebackers, your linebacker group, your third linebacker, we'll see some playing time for sure. Like obviously that's when you're in base and stuff. So you run base, a little bit throughout the games. Nickels obviously more of your base defense nowadays. So we'll see them all out on the field at certain points. But I do think you like to have a nice rotation there too. And I think Walker is a guy that has the versatility to kind of play all 3 spots. Like he has experience playing as like a Mike or a Will. And I also think there's potentially him to give you some snaps at Sam with the instinctive ability. He is a little undersized, and I think he has an injury history. So the injury history is something to notice. David Long also had an injury history, and he stayed healthy for the Dolphins. But Walker, I feel much better about Anthony Walker as your third linebacker than I did last year as a Duke Riley. Because Duke Riley came in as a depth player, and the first 2 games he looked really good actually, and then after that it was really bad. It was really, really bad. Yeah, I like the top 3 starting group much better. And then after that, so the guys you had here last year, you got Duke Riley, special teams guy. As a depth player last year, he had some good games and some really bad games. Like that game versus Baltimore, he was really bad. But the game versus Washington, where he first replaced Baker, he looked really good. So definitely interesting. I still think, he has a high chance to make the team just because special teams won, and also I feel like he's pretty well respected around there, and they see him as like a leader type. But it'll be interesting. I just made a video on Channing Tindall. I don't know if you guys saw that. It's kind of his make or break season. Gonna throw a wild card for best rookie, Bo Nix. I mean that it is a wild card. Personally, I mean, who knows? Maybe Sean Payton can get the most out of him. I just wasn't a fan of him in college personally. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he probably ended up in a pretty good I think he ended up in a pretty good situation for his skill set. But I just don't know if I ever see him being like a good NFL quarterback. I could see him being like average, but I just don't have the highest of hopes. But yeah, going back to Tyndall, I made a video on him, make or break it season, and he hasn't really played much in his first 2 seasons. I talked about it. I wanted Leo Chanel in that draft. I wasn't like mad about the Tyndall pick, but I was like, it wasn't my first option. It made sense. It seems like that's who they wanted to go. But it does seem like, as you're talking about Dundee, like the reason I think he still could stay is because it's his 3rd year and he was a 3rd round draft pick. So like draft, your capital does help you, give you a chance to make the team. They haven't really seen any, like first season, there was like nothing to work off of. Second season, he played like just a handful of snaps, so nothing to really work off of. I will say the only thing I have to work off of is the preseason. And I will say preseason in season 2 looked much better than preseason season 1. So that's like really the only reason I think for hope there is that he played, like he showed more instinct, specifically in coverage. I thought he actually looked pretty good in coverage. And then I would think the other thing that would say there's some hope there. I'm not super hopeful, but the other thing that I would say is hopeful is I think he's a better fit for because he is a run downhill chase type of linebacker, not super instinctive versus the run, but just like see it and get downhill, like just make plays, don't think too much. Very explosive. Like he's got good burst, and I think that's a better fit than like what he had to do in Fangio's defense than being like if you go look at Baltimore's defense and look at how like he would be playing the Patrick Queen role if he had to play, in my opinion, and he has a more similar skill set to Patrick Queen than some of the other guys like that you would see in different systems. But still, I don't see it end up working out too much. Really, the way he makes the roster is he has to beat out like Duke Riley or Cam Brown for special teams role, and those are special teams guys. So he has a tough challenge, but the draft capital probably gives him a little bit of help there. Who do you think should start at linebacker positions? It should be it will be at off ball, it will be Jordan Brooks and David Long, in my opinion, and Anthony Walker will be your third and rotating enough, and those will be like your main 3 guys that play a lot. But Jordan Brooks and David Long will play the majority of snaps. He's incredibly slow to identify the play. Looks like yeah. Especially I will say in the preseason week 2, I do think he looked better at identifying plays. He at least played more with more confidence, I guess is the way to put it. Like it still would be a little bit late from time to process, but at least when he did, he would get downhill. But if you go back to like preseason, season 1, or even college tape, he was definitely not the greatest at like stacking, tracking, processing, working through the trash. When it was like very basic stuff and you just, you see the toss, then he'd get downhill and make a play. But that's why I was always preferred Leo Chanel, because Leo Chanel, if you go watch the Chiefs film or watch him back at Wisconsin, he went 1 pick after Tyndall, so we could have taken him. He was definitely he wasn't as athletic as Tyndall, but he was much better at identifying plays and also better at taking on blocks, which is a big thing too. 4 inside linebackers? Yeah, that's my guess. My guess is 4, and obviously you have your 3, and then I think everyone kind of has a reason to make the roster. As we talked about, Tyndall has the draft capital. Duke Riley has been around. He has the I feel like he's seen as like a leader and has experience. Also was a special teams guy. And then Cam Brown, who they brought in, who's the other guy in the room, is like a really good special teams player. Plus he has a very different skill set. Like he's very long, and I think he's probably the most Sam-like linebacker on the team. And if the team, like if you go back and look at like Malik Harrison on the Ravens last year, who would play in Weaver's system, that he would play just a handful of snaps every game as like a strong Sam, the strong side linebacker. And I think Cam Brown would be the player to do that on this team. So I think that kind of intrigues me for him. It's just tough because I haven't seen any film on Cam Brown because there's not really much film on him. So I don't have too strong of an opinion when it comes to him, but I know what type of player he is and like the skill set. So he is one player I will be keeping an eye on throughout like training camp and preseason to see if he can play that Sam type role. Plus he's a special teams guy. So it'll be interesting. To be fair to Tyndall, this is his 3rd DC in 3 years. Yeah. And he was never like, the super instinctive guy. So that's why I am giving him, like, this is his make or break season. I feel like that's what you give your prospects, especially guys in like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. It's a 3-year window. Got to give these guys a benefit of doubt. Sometimes guys don't develop super fast. And that's okay. That the 3-year window is there for a reason. So he really does have to step up. But I do feel better about the linebacker room as a whole because I think Walker gives you more depth. And I think Jordan Brooks is an upgrade over Jerome Baker. So one of those rooms where I think you upgraded a bit. Now there's a new. Is he just a slow learner of systems? Lofi, is that about Tyndall? That question? Because I mean, it's tough to say because I'm not in the room, with them, and I haven't met him personally, so I don't want to, speculate too much without knowledge. But I do think from watching the film, he's more of an athlete than being like maybe a super instinctive type player. So that probably plays into it. Would you read linebackers where we have our weakest depth? Let me look at the list. It's tough to say because it's because I want to say interior line, but like interior line, I feel like everyone's a depth guy. So technically you have a lot of depth, but you don't have a ton of starters. But 2 of them have to start, so then you lose the depth. You actually don't have even a lot of depth on the roster. Like interior D line, you have a lot of bodies. I'm not like super confident in a lot of them, but like at least you have a lot of players there. At least that could potentially be solid. Edge, you're good. Corners better. Safety's probably better as well. Even though safety is better, but it's kind of similar to the linebacker room. Actually, you have your top 3, and then after that's a little bit sketchy, more just special teams guy. But yeah, I would say it's still not the strongest, but I actually will say most linebacker rooms kind of look like this. They're not. It's not the deepest position in the NFL. Same with interior O-line. But yeah, it's definitely one of the weaker depth-wise on the roster. Yes, I agree. I also think Walker's underrated. I was surprised when I saw his deal was I think he was the vet minimum pretty much. And he was like, wasn't he the first person we signed in free agency? So he was the first person I checked out. I remember being like, oh, it was before we signed Jordan Brooks. I know that for sure. Because I remember thinking like, oh, like he could start. Because I think, like for like they're going to get rid of Baker. Like he could start. And I would be like, and I wouldn't think that's the worst thing in the world. Like I actually thought his film was solid. He just has an injury history. So like keep adding more bodies. But him as your 3rd guy, I think that's solid. I think he does a good job versus the run and the pass. Like he's not like the most. he's not the biggest guy and he's not the most athletic either. Like he's a solid athlete. He's undersized, but he definitely understands what's going on. He reads and processes, as I showed earlier, like the QB's reads, their drops, their depths, get in the throwing lane, and then he also does a good job working within the box too. But he won't give you like that sideline to sideline range. Definitely a smart player though, which I like. That's kind of what I want out of a lot of linebackers. It's great when you can find a player that's super instinctive and super athletic. Those Roquan Smiths that can just make every play. The Fred Warners of the worlds. Those guys really, as I said earlier in the stream, I think linebacker is an underrated position because there's a lot of premium positions. But I think if you look at all the top defenses in the NFL, those linebackers are really what separates a lot of them. Because a lot of teams have good edges, a lot of teams have good corners because they put premiums on those positions, but not a lot of them have great linebacker play. And that's why players like Roquan Smith and Fred Warner are so valuable. Does anyone know where Walker's from? Like college? I'm seeing right here on, apparently he was a former Heat intern. And didn't he play like Northwestern or something? I think he played at Northwestern, but I don't know where he's from exactly. Anthony Walker. College. Yeah, he played college at Northwestern. Home? I don't know. Maybe if I look up like high school. I actually think he might be a Miami guy, because if he was a Heat intern. But yeah, I think he's from Miami Gardens. Anthony Walker Jr. Let's see. Yeah, he was born in Miami, Florida, yeah. He is a Miami guy. Age 28. That's probably why he came here. Yeah. Makes sense, makes sense. Okay, yeah, and then that in the linebacker room's pretty quick. Like all we have left is I'm gonna do the running back room probably tomorrow. I'm gonna do a stream tomorrow, running back room. And then I will probably do another stream before training camp talking about the QB room, because then that'll be everyone. All the breakdowns done, and then we'll get into training camp, talk specifics, maybe go over some of the clips we see. Just have something to talk about football related that's, current, because I need some football in my life. But does anyone have any more questions? Because that's the whole room. We only have 6 guys in the off-ball linebacker room. And you probably have 4 of those make the rosters, potentially 5. But I'm guessing also you have to consider like they're probably going to keep like 5 edges. Usually keep about 9 linebackers total. So 5 plus 4, yeah, 9, yeah. And, potentially you could see some of those guys maybe cross-train. They don't really have many cross-train players, though, I'll be honest. But yeah, Jordan Brooks, who I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks is one of my favorite signings this offseason. I've talked about it again and again. And I think he's so important to the team's success this season, playing as in that like Roquan Smith style role. And I think he's the guy that could do it. But yeah. What do you guys think? You guys have any questions, comments about the linebacker room, anything else? But yeah, because I feel pretty solid. I played my Jordan Brooks video earlier. This is someone else's from Twitter. Oh, never mind, actually. Let me go here real quick. But yeah, Cam Brown is like the one where I'm like, I don't know, That's like, there's not a lot of film on him, and he's like very intriguing. I know he's known for his special team stuff, but he has like really good athleticism, and like he's very long and lengthy. And I think that's kind of different than from a lot of the other more traditional off-ball linebackers that are on the team. Especially because some of them are, not the biggest people, like David Long, Anthony Walker, are not very big guys. Jordan Brooks is so solid size, but he's not like a towering individual. I'm pretty sure Cam Brown is pretty tall and lengthy. So it'll be interesting to see if he can play that like Sam role where you're more like near the line of scrimmage, might, have to set an edge, hold hold your own versus tight ends, stack and shed, that type of thing. Love watching Jordan Brooks just go to work the pre-snap. Like, look at him right here. He's pointing with the motion. He's calling out the play. He's cheating to it pre-snap. That just tells me that that's a guy that watches film. He understands what's going on. Also has the athleticism to act on these types of plays, that sideline to sideline range, and mix plays within coverage. He can also slip underneath some O linemen too. Here we get to see him, locate number 2, working back underneath, carry it. Doesn't just cover grass either. I like guys that can match and stuff. Plus being a blitzer. Big fan of Jordan Brooks. One of my favorite signings. And he's still young, and they have him on a 3-year deal. It doesn't get too much better than that. I think it's a big upgrade over last year. Yeah, I think it's definitely an upgrade. I know it's all good. We don't need linebacker questions. Running back versus wide receiver snaps. What's the percentage split for Achane? Like legitimate snaps, I think we're gonna see. Like, I feel like there's reports that like Achane's gonna be receiver this year. I don't think that's like, he's still a running back, but he's definitely gonna see an uptick in receiving usage this season. Whether he's lined up at receiver or it's out of the backfield, because I think you'll see like how the Dolphins did last year. Sometimes you have your running back lined up out wide. Sometimes the receiver's at tight end. Sometimes your tight end's in the backfield. Like, people will move around. But I do think Achane will be much more involved in the receiving game. I would say like 20% at receiver, which I think it's pretty high for a running back. And I'm excited to see him get to use. I have another plan for a video. I'm probably going to upload a video tomorrow on Odell Beckham Jr., but it's also combined with some other clips that I found of like Tyreek and Waddle being double teamed in games. So I'm going to do a film breakdown on like how Odell's going to really help on like third down situations when like teams would go cover 2 man against us. How Odell's going to help us, how Tua losing some weights can help us, because the ways to beat cover 2 man is obviously have a third guy that can get open. And then the biggest thing is having an athletic quarterback because they don't have a spy on them. I think those are like 2 things that can really, really help out. Plus, having more guys that are underneath threats like a Jonnu Smith, having Achane come is going to be very helpful. Long and Brooks healthy, I think it's pretty solid. As far as rotational guys, still a bit questionable. Yes, I think Walker is an upgrade at the rotational guys, but I do agree after that, it's not the greatest group. But to be fair, I don't think many teams in the NFL really have great depth past your 3 guys at linebacker. It's not a super deep position right now with like high level players. Same with O-line, which is a word. Any word on Easy A? Easy E? I haven't heard anything since like the mini camps and stuff. So he'll be another intriguing one to watch because there's a lot of players that I'm just like, I don't have too strong of feelings on right now, and I think Easy is one of them. With how many receivers they brought in, like I want to see Malik and Taj. I think Malik will stick around. I would be surprised if he didn't, but I want to see Taj stick around too. So it's like, do you move on from Barrios? Do they keep him? Do you have Craig Kraft go to your practice squad? Hopefully, I've talked about that a lot too. But we'll see how Easy ends up working out. He does have a different skill set from most of the receivers on the roster, and I think he's another 3rd-year guy where he probably gets another chance. Probably his maker to break it year 2 along with Tyndall. Wright needs to be in the mix. Ryan Achane, the future of Mister's gone after Jeremy. Yeah. Yeah, I just don't know how much we'll see Wright as a receiver, but yeah, I would love to see Wright being used. I think late season, I would love to see Wright with like fresh legs. Like I'm expecting to see a lot of Mostert and Achane early on, mixing Jalen Wright in, obviously. But then once you start using Achane more as receiver, start giving Wright more and more touches, and then late season, when everyone's kind of banged up, just feed Wright, man. Like, use Achane and Mostert to their highest potential. You don't have to like, you can be a little more rested, get them like high value touches, and then kind of feed Wright a lot of those interior touches, because Wright has a lot of experience working in gap scheme and inside zone stuff. So and he has a bigger frame than, some of the running backs on the roster. He can take a little more punishment. I don't know how he is a receiver though. He was barely used as a receiver in college. He did say he's a better receiver than what he was used at. So that's an area I will keep an eye on to see how his hands are. Can he run some routes? He's not going to be like an Achane level receiver, but I do think he could probably do a little more than he did in college. They're going to start running 2 to 3 RB on the field at the same time. Oh yeah, Dolphins love 21 personnel, which is, if you don't know, 2 running backs, 1 tight end on the field, which also means 2 receivers. But uh, a lot of teams don't run 21, but the Dolphins run a lot of 21. Like last year, they'd have Mostert and Nation on the field at the same time. Also, technically having Ingold on the field with a running back is considered 21 personnel. But the Dolphins, I think, run 21 personnel more than anyone, or they're at least top 3. And I expect that to continue. I think you might see more 12, though, out of them. The Dolphins run 12 very little, but I think you might see a little more 12 this year with them adding Jonnu and having like a Durham Smythe. But it is interesting. That personnel misdirection is a real option for us. Yeah, there will be a. I'm very intrigued to see how the personnel works this year and how like what the defense matches up against them. You know, will when they come out in their certain looks, will you see base? Will you see them still in nickel? Or how are they gonna, who's gonna line up versus H? If H-N is lined up, like say in the slot or outside, who's gonna line up versus him? Because remember that rep last year where he just smoked Jamin Davis out wide versus Washington, but it was the long slot fade touchdown to Tyreek instead. Like I feel like H-N's gonna smoke linebackers. That's why I'm like, if teams play cover 2 man against us, and say Tyreek and Wilder are getting double teamed, you have Odell getting his 1-on-1. He can win 1-on-1s, and then you probably have a linebacker on H-N. He could win that 1-on-1, especially with more experience, him practicing more as a receiver, just being more on the same page. Because he would get open sometimes, but you could tell him and Tua weren't quite on the same page. It seemed to get better as the season went on, so I think that's helpful. But it is very intriguing. They added a lot of pieces on offense, and Mike has a lot of different personnel packages that he could use now. I feel like they can just be more versatile, which is very important because I think that kind of hurt the offense later on. Yeah, I think Wright going to be number 1 eventually. I could see that, Greg. I could see like Wright I could see Wright getting like the most touches, but Achane would still get like the most yards. You know what I'm saying? Like Wright would be like your grind out guy, but Achane would get like some like really high value screens, tosses where he gets a bunch of yards, maybe lighter boxes when he's in, and then he'll be a little more. You don't have to feed him as much, so he'll be a little more fresh, a little more healthy, and he can take advantage of that. It wouldn't surprise me if Wright ends up getting like the most touches at certain points in some games this season, especially with Mostert being older, having some injuries last year. Even though I do think Achane should still be like the top guy because I think he's the most talented. But I'm a big fan of Jalen Wright. I've watched a lot of Jalen Wright. I went to all the Tennessee home games last year. So yeah. Yeah, it will probably start out as a lower percentage Dundee, and then I think the percentage would rise for Achane at receiver as the year went on. Also, Malik Washington going to be maybe the next Tyreek for us. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call anyone the next Tyreek. I don't like to do those comparisons, but you won't find a bigger Malik Washington fan. That was my favorite pick in the draft. I love Malik Washington. I was a big fan of him before the draft happened. He's more of a slot-only player, while Tyreek can do it all and is obviously more explosive, but Malik Washington is an absolute dog, and I think he'll be our number 4 receiver this year. I'm worried some of these really good players we pushed off the practice squad. Yeah, that is, as Dundee says, that's sometimes how it goes. I think, it also isn't the worst problem to have if that your team's so good that, like, you got to cut good players. That's not the worst problem to have, but it is, like, this is the most, like, stacked roster from top to bottom I've ever seen the Dolphins have. That's why like it's so hard for me. I feel like last year it was pretty easy to predict. You could even be like the last couple years, a few UDFAs would make the roster. So you'd be like, okay, that's cool. This year I'm like, unless injuries happen, I don't see more. Like, it's hard to see a path for UDFAs to make the roster this year. I'm predicting maybe 1, but even like 1 at the most as of right now, unless multiple injuries happen, then I could see more happening. But then there's even some guys that I'm like, oh, I don't want them to get poached. But they're going to be down to the wire, like Taj Washington. If they waive Taj Washington, he's getting picked up. Like Ethan Bonner. Ethan Bonner, I love Ethan Bonner, but he's kind of, I think he makes it. To be fair, I think he makes it. But he's kind of on the edge of the roster too, They have a lot of bodies there, so. And I don't want him getting poached either, which I think he probably would get poached after showing some good stuff last year. But yeah. Let me see. I think the Netflix is to sell on taking away the middle of the field and challenging to it. Yeah. I think it has less to do. You know what it is? I think it has less to do with the teams selling out to middle of the field. Well, they obviously did sell it to the middle of the field, but like you can still take advantage of the middle of the field, but the Dolphins need to take more advantage of just the underneath part of the middle of the field, or like, you know, in those pockets. It doesn't even have to be quite in the middle, like between the numbers and the hashes too. That's why I think bringing in Jonnu Smith is so important. Yes, I think being able to attack outside the numbers is something they can do more of too. But I think the biggest thing is guys just, their linebackers started getting so much depth versus the Dolphins. It's insane how often, like, if the Dolphins just had a tight end sit at like 9 yards in the middle of the field, they'd just be wide open. Or if they're going to do that, at least give them something to look at. Jonnu Smith underneath will at least be more of a threat. And if they start putting attention to that, then you can start hitting more of those deep digs, you know, the dagger stuff to Tyreek and Waddle. But we'll see. What's your view on right ball security? I think it could use some work, but it's not like a major concern right now. We'll see how it ends up playing out. Yeah, we know Malik is there, but our receiver coverage is pretty insane. Bears probably sticking around this year, but Washington is a common move, the odd ones. Well, I've talked about this. For me, I actually don't know. Like I have some guesses what could happen, but for right now, personally, for me, Berrios would be the first one to go. Like, I don't think Berrios is a bad receiver to have on the roster. He brings some special team stuff. He'll make some clutch third down catches. But overall, you brought in, I think Malik can take over his role. Like, I think Malik is just a better slot option for him. And I think Taj Washington can do a lot of that stuff too. Really, the only way I see Berrios really making the roster is because of the special team stuff. He was a very reliable returner last year. I've also talked about Craycraft. I think Craycraft is a guy that I would love to see stick around, but on the practice squad. So, like, just elevate him. Like, he could be a guy that if he's on the practice squad, but you elevate him all the time, you know? Because I feel like he's out of those guys. I think Ezukama, Taj, they probably get claimed if you waive them. I think Craycraft, you can probably get to your practice squad, and he's the type of guy that you can just elevate over and over and over again to continue playing, while some maybe the young guys like Ezukama, Taj, Malik need to get, you know, more experience within the system. So Craycraft can still play and be around. But he's probably the guy you could most likely get to the practice squad out of everyone else. I spent morning of draft day 3 telling an Eagles friend about Anaya Smith. He was telling me about Malik. I feel like, do you agree? Yeah, and I also liked Anaya Smith too, but I actually had Malik rated above Anais, and I think he went 2 rounds later, so I prefer Malik as well, especially with the draft spot. But I did like Anaya Smith. I've known about Anaya Smith for like probably 3 years. Same with A-Chan. I was watching them. I watched a lot of Texas A&M for years now, and Anais is a fun player. Lots of versatility. I just think Malik is a better overall receiver than Anais. But Anais gives you like some running back versatility, that type of thing. As far as financially, where does Berrios go this year? I think there would be some dead cap with Berrios. I forget the exact numbers with Berrios, but I think you would save some money cap wise, but there would be some dead cap too. It was like 1 something million dead cap or something like that. Which wide receiver do you see handling the 50-50 balls? See, that's the thing. The Dolphins don't have many 50-50. Actually, to answer, it's probably more of a tight end. I think if Jody Fortson makes the roster, he'll be more of that 50-50 jump ball guy that you throw like a fade to in the end zone. You throw it up to him, whether it's a fade, you know. That's why I really want Fortson to make the team as a tight end, because he is basically a pseudo receiver that can stretch the field, but also be a jump ball guy. Realistically, the only ones that at receiver that is kind of a 50-50 jump ball guy is Ezu Konma. Has that size. He is actually pretty good at the catch point. The only problem with Eze is he's not the best route runner, and he just needs to be more like get in the right place at the right time. We'll see if he elevates that part of his game. He's very good after the catch, and he's very good at the catch point. It's just the middling parts that he can struggle. That's where I think Tua gets a simple pre-snap read before he starts, and then the play is just where Tua gets a simple pre-snap read before he starts all the motions, and the play is just a play where your top QB changing protections, changing routes, etc. to went down. Yeah, well, I actually think there's not a lot of QBs that have a lot of power in the NFL right now, especially pre-snap. It's actually changed quite a bit since like the Bradys and the Mannings have left. Obviously, like Rodgers is still around, but not a lot of them have. I actually think McDaniel should give Tua a little more control because I think a lot of the times it's Tua's fault, but I also think it's a little bit of McDaniel's fault of like he kind of forces Tua to make some of those throws because I think they can make it a little more simple too, just being like, here's an interesting thing because while the system fits exactly what Tua does well, what Tua does well is very difficult. Like he does the very difficult stuff well, like with those deep middle of the field timing throws, most QBs don't do good at. But Tua does those really well. But when you have to do them over and over and over and over again, I would think that's what I'm thinking. Like sometimes just throw like a quick little 5-yard option route, make things easy, get your receivers, get your quarterback in rhythm. And also, if you've watched Kurt Warner, I think Kurt Warner does a good job breaking it down. It's a combination of Tua and how like the reads are set up. That sometimes the routes are distributed that can actually make it even harder to get to other reads. So it's a multiple people problem. I think hopefully that stuff can improve. I think it looks like they're trying to improve multiple of the problems. I think Tua losing weight helps you in cover 2 man. Adding Odell gives you another man beater in those situations. I think adding Jonnu Smith gives you that guy underneath now, giving someone that you can throw it to as an underneath option. Same thing with adding guys and also like Malik and Taj. Those are guys who are good underneath, but also really good at like running the slot fade. That was like one of their best routes, beating man-to-man coverage. And that's one of Tua's best throws is the slot fade. So we'll see how it all ends up playing out. Definitely a part of the season I'm seeing, especially as the season goes on. I feel like obviously early on in the season they do a good job at it, but yeah. Smythe is becoming pretty solid. Yeah, Smythe is just a solid player. Nothing too special all around. Not really bad in one area, but not great in any area. I mean, he's not going to give you much as a route runner, but he's got reliable hands, knows where to be in the right spot. He's a solid blocker. I think adding Jonnu will help him a lot because I think Smythe has always been more of a tight end too, but he's had to play a tight end 1 role for the Dolphins for some time now. So hopefully him just being more of that tight end too can focus on that stuff, while Jonnu can be more of your get yards after the catch. That will help him. He force feeds Hill a lot too. Yeah. And that's also sometimes, yeah. I think sometimes it's Tua, sometimes it's just the play call where it's going to Hill. Plus, but also if you do look at the percentage, I do think the whole like they force feed Hill and Waddle thing is a little overblown because if you look at the percentage of targets that the receivers get, it was the same basically from 2022 to 2023. And if you look around the NFL, like a lot of the percentage targets are pretty similar for number 1 wide receivers. So I do think that's a little bit overblown the narrative, but it is something that definitely happens from time to time. His yak is poor though. Yeah, and yak is very important at the tight end position. That's a big reason I loved adding Jonnu Smith because that's where he excels at. Definitely adds a nice little something different than what Smythe has. I got Odell penciled in. Not sure if he can get route timing down with Tua earlier in the season. Well, I do want to say with Odell, he does have experience. He did play with the Rams for a season and did have a pretty solid season with the Rams. And the Rams do run a lot of similar concepts that Miami does. So he at least does have some experience. We'll see if they get the chemistry on the same page. But I do think a lot of Odell's best routes are what a lot of Tua's best throws are. So I do see it being a pretty good complement of each other. But yeah, we'll see how it all plays out, guys. It'll be interesting. Training camp is huge. Preseason is huge. That changes everything. Sometimes players step up out of nowhere. Plus, preseason is so huge. Like, say there's like an undrafted guy you're not expecting to make the team just because of the bodies around him, but he just shows out in the preseason. Usually those guys end up making the roster because you're thinking like, dude, we can't this because scouts are looking at the preseason to like that's who you're trying to claim. Like they're working like to watch a lot of these guys' tapes, see who's performing. So if one of those guys just randomly, shows out, they're not going to want to get rid of him. Like what happened last year with Julian Hill Like Julian Hill had a really solid. Same with Chris Brooks last year. The year before that, it was Kohu. Kohu had a really good preseason. They're like, oh, can't get rid of him. Even if it was like you have to get rid of someone else or potentially, but yeah. After the cut to 53, do you think Dolphins might add another center? Yeah, I think if it's, I don't think the Dolphins will be able to claim anyone. I think they're too late in the claim order to get like a solid center prospect. But if there is someone cut, I've talked about, I think his name's Hainsey from Tampa Bay. They drafted Graham Barton. He's actually not a bad center player. And I could see that the Buccaneers cutting him because I think it saves them some cap. That would be an interesting direction to go at center as a backup option. If we stick with the targeting percentage for wide receiver drafting plus OBJ, that would be a bit of a failure in my opinion. Yeah, well, I do think the percentages should change a little bit, but I don't think it should be drastic, honestly. Yeah, should be interesting. I don't think Greer is going to pay a market deal. Just don't see it. Honestly, I think when it's all said and done, I don't really care what like the market deal is. I don't care if it's 50 million a year, 55 million a year, it's 60 million a year. It won't be 60, but I'm just throwing out numbers. Or if it's 45 million, I don't really care what that number is personally. I think people will overreact whatever the number is either way. That number really doesn't matter. It's all about the guarantees and how it's structured and when you have like your out, you know? Where is the out within the contract, how you can save your money, set things up. Because most deals, guys, with QBs don't really play out all the way. They rarely do. Most of them get restructured. That's why like the later on years don't matter too much. It's going to get restructured. Money will be moved around. So we'll see how it all ends up playing out. But I'm not like a cap expert. That's just like, so I'm not like I know a lot about the cap, but I don't know like a ton when it comes to like how the contracts are structured. But yeah, that's what like really matters, to be honest. Conspiracy for Dak. I actually like Dak, but I don't see that happening. Plus, I just don't think that's worth it. I agree, Dundee. The cut to the 53 is probably the hardest it's been in a while. It's like really hard, especially just like I'm just doing it off my head and looking at the roster and trying to do the numbers in my head. I guess I could do like a final cut down. I'll probably do a final cut down a little bit into training camp through preseason, like before they actually do their cuts, to see what I would do, and then we'll see how that similar that is to what Greer ends up doing. Yeah. Well, I think Greg, when it comes to like, I think you got to look at it. To me, it doesn't. It's more better to look at the percentage of how much, like compared to the cap that the QB is making. You know, because it being like 55 million a year and he's technically the highest paid, but what's the percentage that compared to the cap, you know, compared to like guys in the years past, you know, because the cap's going to raise within, even if Tua became the highest paid quarterback, within even a few months, he will be, you know, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the highest paid quarterback. So that all changes very quickly. I think looking at the percentage of how much that QB takes up the cap compared to like maybe how much Burrow took up the cap when he got his extension a couple years back, or last year, whatever it was. Love your work, bro. Please shout out my kids, Aaliyah and Raymond. We were watching live. Hey, shout out Aaliyah and Raymond. What's up, Mario? How you doing? Go Dolphins, obviously. Very excited to see how this season plays out. Any more questions? Anything about the linebackers? Anything about anything? And Dolphins related, honestly. I mean, it's a team. I just don't put too much. A lot of QBs have Like Jared Goff just got paid big. I guess he's had playoff success, but to me, that's more of an indictment on the Lions team than it is on Goff. But it's just the nature of the game. It's just the nature of the game. Like, not everyone, like, some great quarterbacks never won it. Like, Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. He's one of the best QBs to ever play the game. Sometimes that's how things plays out. Plus, like, you look at Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning in his first 4 years couldn't win anything. He looked like people would say the same thing about Manning in his first 4 years, and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Sometimes you just got to take a risk. It's all a risk pretty much at this point. And yeah, fins up. Hope the Dolphins do win the division. I agree. But yeah, it's nothing like when it comes to Tua, it's a risk either way, paying him top dollar, or I think it's even a bigger risk to let him play on the 5th-year option, because then you're going to have to pay him real premium money, Will the Sunday ticket case be affecting contract negotiation? It might affect future cap changes, or will it? I'm not too sure about that, Dundee, to be honest. I am not too sure about that. But I mean, I've just always been like, it doesn't matter the player, because like that's why I'm like, I was saying extend Waddle, extend Phillips. I think the more you like, if you're going to keep a player, in my opinion, like if you plan on keeping a player long term, extend them as quickly as possible, because then that contract a year from now will look much better. Like, so I'd rather not wait to like. I feel like the Dolphins already plan to keep Tua long term. Like and because I think they believe in him. And plus, if you look at QB's options, like within free agency in the draft, it is not pretty. So I just think it's smarter from a long-term perspective to pay your guys now. If we have the 10 to 15 grade QB and a 32, yeah, especially because it's always tough. It's tough to rank Tua, I think, too, as well, because I think within this Dolphin system, Tua is probably a top 5 quarterback. But if he's in another system, he probably drops down like a decent amount of spots, So I think that also plays a part. Like for this system specifically, you're not going to find too many better options. But then in a different system, I could definitely see teams taking many quarterbacks over Tua, which also, it's definitely a hard position to be in. My daughter thinks he'll be a Pro Bowler. If we're talking about Tua, well, he was a Pro Bowler last year. I do think statistically, Tua's going to put up good stats again. I think he's very good at putting up stats. I would probably guess him as a Pro Bowler as well. I probably agree with that. He definitely gives us our best chance right now. Agreed. You got a lot of ifs. If you don't start projecting, all the positives will happen. Think you're saving money. You got a lot. Okay. See, I just think with Lofi, I understand. I'm sort of with the ifs people have with Tua. I don't think I have the same ifs, I think a lot of people do. There's definitely ifs, but every player has ifs. I just don't have as many with Tua as other people. I'm probably more confident with him than most. But we'll see how it plays out. See how it plays out overall. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure. Even if Tua, like, to me, I'm not a big stats person. Like, I don't put too much stock in when it comes to stats. I think whether Tua plays good or bad, he's probably going to put up great stats. That's just the nature of the system, the play style, the players around him. Him as a player, like, he is, regardless of like arm strength, he likes to sling the ball around and make some big time throws. So, and he has big time players, so it's going to eventually put up numbers. Plus, they throw the ball a lot. And that's regardless if he's playing good or bad. Aaliyah, she is clearly a football genius. Shout out Aaliyah. Yeah, I think I'm gonna end it. Don't need to spend too much time talking about Tua, at this point in the off season. I feel like we've all probably made it. It's not like anyone's changing people's minds at this point. But I'm excited to see the season, how it plays out. Should be fun. So unless there's any last second questions, well, we went for an hour. It's been an hour on the dot. It's 59 minutes, 59 seconds, now an hour. Pretty good. Pretty good. Let me check my phone real quick. Okay. But yeah, I'm about to end stream. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. We'll do a running back stream next, probably tomorrow. Also, I'm probably gonna post a film breakdown tomorrow on Odell, plus a mix of like the Dolphins offensive clips to like show how teams clearly stop the Dolphins on third downs. But this is the most talented roster the Dolphins have ever had. They're kind of in their window right now anyways. Like, that's another reason I would say for the whole Tua thing is they're kind of in their 2 to 3 year window. So you got to make the most of it. We'll see how it all ends up playing out. But yeah, thank you.